In about 90 seconds, my father was going to hear 4 words he'd spent 38 years making sure I never said to his face. He was standing at the head of his own dinner table, wine glass raised, about to give the same toast he always gave. And I was sitting 3 seats down with a folder in my lap, waiting for him to say the line he didn't know I'd already decided to use against him. He'd called me that line since I was 6 years old. He was about to say it one more time in front of everyone he loved, without knowing it was the last time it would ever sound like a joke. Welcome to Calm Drama Chronicles, where quiet people finally stop staying quiet. My name is Naomi Whitaker. I'm 38 years old. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology. And for 14 years, I've made a living teaching other people how to spot a lie before it finishes leaving someone's mouth. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, because I promise you, you have never sat at a table like the one you're about to sit at with me. But I have to take you back first. Back to a Tuesday in October, in a parking lot behind my own office, when a stranger said my name like he'd been waiting his whole life to say it. Portland's not a big city, but it's big enough that strangers don't usually know your name. That's what got me. I was locking up my office. I run a small family therapy practice off Hawthorne, the kind with a waiting room that smells like eucalyptus and a receptionist who waters the same dying fern every Tuesday, when a man said it like a confirmation, not a question. Naomi Whitaker. I turned around already smiling, the way you do with a client's husband or an old acquaintance you can't quite place. He wasn't either. 60-ish, gray at the temples. A coat too warm for October. Hands folded in front of him like he was standing at a funeral. I'm sorry, do we know each other? Not yet, he said. My name is Vincent Mercer. I've been looking for you for a long time. I felt annoyance before I felt anything else. It happens sometimes. People find my practice online, decide I look trustworthy, and show up outside my building instead of calling for an appointment like a normal person. If you need a therapist, I have office hours. I don't need a therapist. He said it gently, which somehow made it worse. I need you to know something about your family. About your parents. I laughed, standing there with my keys still in my hand. My parents are Douglas and Irene Whitaker. Whatever you think you know, I know you were adopted. Everyone knows that. It isn't a secret. It's a punchline. Has been since I was 6 years old, standing in a room full of relatives while my father introduced me with a pause built in for laughter. That's not exactly breaking news, I said. Vincent didn't blink, didn't smile either. What if I told you the story you were given isn't the true one? Every professional instinct I own should have told me to walk away. Instead, I stood there in that parking lot, keys digging into my palm, and asked the one question I had never once let myself ask out loud in 38 years. What do you know that I don't? I didn't answer him. I got in my car, drove home, and told myself I'd forget the whole thing by morning. I didn't. I've spent 14 years teaching clients how to name their pain, how to stop excusing the people who hurt them, and then I go to family dinners and let my father call me our adopted one in front of 20 relatives, and I smile like it's nothing. It started when I was 6. He'd introduced me to guests, new neighbors, business partners, anyone who hadn't heard the bit yet, with this little pause before the word adopted, like he was building to a punchline. This is Naomi, our adopted one. People would laugh. Because what else do you do? And my mother would laugh, softest of all, like she was in on something. I used to think it was clumsy affection. Maybe this was his way of saying, look how far we came, look how much we chose her. That's the story I told myself for 32 years. Because the alternative, that they built a wall between me and the rest of the family, one joke at a time, was too much to hold. Then 2 months ago, at my cousin Ellen's engagement dinner, my father raised his glass and said it again. Same words, same pause, same laugh from the table. I didn't laugh that time. I sat there with a glass in my hand and thought, I am 38 years old and I am still the punchline at my own family's table. For the first time in my life, that didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a pattern. And patterns, in my line of work, always mean something. Once you start looking for a pattern, you can't stop seeing it. I spent the next few days doing something I tell my clients never to do, replaying old memories, except this time I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for cracks. I found them. I have never once seen my own adoption paperwork. Not once. Every time I asked as a teenager, my mother would get a soft, wounded look and say, "Why would you need that? You're ours." And I'd feel guilty for asking, like I'd accused her of something, and I'd drop it. Every single time. There are exactly 0 photographs of me before age 3. My brother Michael has albums, baby pictures, hospital pictures, all of it. Mine started at a birthday party I don't remember, 3 candles on a cake, and nothing before that. I used to think it was bad luck, a box lost in some move. Funny thing is, the story changed depending on who told it. My Aunt Carol, my father's sister, has not spoken more than 10 words to me at a single family gathering in 30 years. I always assumed she just didn't like kids. She adores Michael's kids. None of it felt like anything on its own. That's what scared me. I built a whole career on telling people that harm isn't always one event. It's 1,000 small ones that only make sense once you stop excusing them individually and start counting them together. I had never once done that math on my own life. So I did it, at my kitchen table at 11 at night, with a legal pad, like I was building a case against a stranger instead of my own parents. By the time I put the pen down, my hands weren't steady. I thought about calling Michael. I thought about calling my mother and asking her, flat out, why there were no baby pictures. Instead, I found the card Vincent Mercer had pressed into my hand, the one I'd shoved in my coat pocket and told myself I'd throw away. I typed one text before I could talk myself out of it. "Where can we meet, and how do I know I can trust anything you tell me?" His answer came back in under a minute. "You don't know if you can trust me yet." That's fair. Ask me something only your parents would know the answer to. I'll tell you if I'm right. I typed something I'd never said out loud to another living soul. What color was the blanket I came home in? It was a stupid test. I didn't even know the answer myself. I'd just always been told there was a blanket, that my mother kept it somewhere, that it was special. I figured a stranger would guess wrong. Vincent wrote back in less than a minute. "There was no blanket, Naomi. You came home in a hospital receiving gown, size newborn, white with a blue stripe. It's in the paperwork. The paperwork your mother has never shown you." My hands didn't move for a full minute after I read that. Because I never told him about the blanket story. Not to Michael. Not to my own therapist. Years ago. It was just something I'd absorbed as fact, the way you absorb the color of your childhood bedroom walls. True because it had always been true. He knew it was a lie before I did. We met 2 days later, a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, the kind of place where nobody looks twice at 2 strangers arguing quietly in a corner booth. Vincent slid a folder across the table. Not thick, just enough. A date that didn't match the one on my birth certificate. A name, an agency, a caseworker that had never once come up in 38 years of family conversation, and a line typed plain and flat that made the back of my neck go cold. Biological family notified. No response received. "That doesn't mean what you think it means," Vincent said, watching my face. "Not yet. But it means someone tried to reach your parents, and it means they never told you." I closed the folder. My coffee had gone cold, and I hadn't noticed. "I need to hear this from them," I said. "Not from you, not from a folder." Vincent nodded, like he'd expected exactly that. "They'll deny it," he said. "Be ready for that." I told him I could handle my own parents. I had no idea how wrong I was about to be. I drove out on a Sunday, because Sundays are when my father is calmest. Post-church, pre-golf, a cup of decaf in his hand. I left the folder in the car. I wanted to hear their answer before I gave them evidence to argue with. I sat across from him at the kitchen table where I'd eaten 10,000 breakfasts and asked calmly, the way I'd ask a client to name their earliest memory, "Why have I never seen my adoption paperwork?" He didn't look up from his coffee. "Where is this coming from? A man named Vincent Mercer." He says a caseworker tried to contact you, that there's no blanket, that the date on my birth certificate doesn't match the Naomi. My mother's voice went soft and urgent at once, the tone people use right before they ask you to stop talking without technically telling you to stop. Some strange man cornered you and you believed him. I didn't say I believed him. I said I have questions. We gave you everything, my father said. Flat. Final. Final. The tone he used to end business calls. A home, an education, a family. And this is what you bring into our kitchen? I'm not asking about what you gave me. I'm asking why there's no paperwork. There is paperwork, my mother said quickly. It's old. Boxes get lost in moves, Naomi, you know this. Which is it, lost, or I never needed to see it? Silence. You need to stop talking to this man, my father said finally. He sounds unstable. I don't want him near you, and I certainly don't want him near this family. Not he's lying, not there's nothing to find. Stop talking to him. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind anything but. I'd asked 2 direct questions. I hadn't gotten one direct answer. I started keeping a second life. By day, I was still Dr. Whitaker, calm for other people's families, while mine quietly came apart in the back of my mind. By night, I was a woman at her kitchen table past midnight, requesting county records, cross-referencing dates. The birth certificate was the first real crack. The filing date was 11 days after my listed birth date. I called the county records office. A tired clerk put me on hold for 20 minutes and came back to say, politely, that they had no record of a hospital birth matching my name and date at all. None. Word travels fast in a family that's spent decades protecting its own image. By the following week, my mother had stopped calling. Michael texted less. My father spoke to me the way he speaks to contractors he's decided he doesn't fully trust. I went to the one person I thought might actually tell me the truth. My Aunt Carol answered her door in gardening gloves, already looking at me like she knew exactly why I'd come. I have some questions about when I was born, I said. You should ask your parents. I did. They didn't answer me. Something flickered across her face and was gone. It's not my place. Whatever your parents decided, they decided for good reasons. You should let it rest, sweetheart. Decided. Not whatever happened. Decided. I tried Ruth, my father's cousin, who suddenly remembered somewhere she needed to be. I tried Harold, an old friend of my father's, who managed exactly one sentence. Some things are better left in the past, before finding a reason to hang up. Nobody was lying to my face. They were just refusing to tell the truth to it, and in my line of work, an entire family choosing the same silence, in the same careful language, isn't coincidence. It's coordination. My phone lit up with a name I hadn't expected. Michael. Can you come by? He said. Just you, not Mom and Dad. I drove over with something dangerously close to hope. Michael has never lied to me. Not once. Not in 38 years. He met me on his porch, not letting me inside, like whatever he had to say couldn't happen under his own roof. I need you to stop, he said. Please. For everyone's sake. Michael, I found a letter. Our family's lawyer contacted a caseworker and told her to stop trying to reach, I know, 2 words. That's all it took to knock the air out of me. You know about the letter? I've known for years, Naomi. Dad told me when I was 20, when I helped him go through some old files. He made me promise never to say anything. He said it would destroy you if you knew. That it was better for me or better for him? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. 18 years. My brother had sat across from me at every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary Tuesday dinner, and said nothing. Let me believe I was the punchline of a bad joke instead of the subject of a decision he'd been trusted to keep buried. I wanted to tell you so many times, he said, his voice cracking on it. But you didn't. Naomi, you let me sit there. For 18 years. I don't remember walking back to my car. I remember sitting in the driver's seat, hands shaking, running through every family memory I owned, wondering who else had been sitting across from me, smiling, keeping the same secret. It took 2 days to stop shaking long enough to think clearly. One detail kept snagging in my mind. Michael said Dad told him it would destroy me. Not embarrass, not complicate things. Destroy. That's not the language people use to protect a child from an ordinary adoption story. People don't hire attorneys and silence caseworkers because a stranger might someday learn they were adopted. That part isn't shameful. It isn't rare. Which meant I'd been asking the wrong question. I'd been asking why they hid that I was adopted. The real question was why they needed to hide the circumstances of it. I called Vincent that night. "I think this goes beyond the adoption," he said. "I've been trying to get into probate archives for weeks, records tied to your father's estate and his brother's. Everything I've seen so far points somewhere financial. Financial, not sentimental, not even reputational, was just the excuse layered on top." I thought about the trust Michael always mentioned in passing, the one tied to my grandfather's estate, the one I'd never once asked a single question about because it had simply never occurred to me that it might involve me at all. "There's a trust," I said slowly. "I need to see how it's structured, who's named in it, who isn't. Those documents aren't public, Naomi. And if your parents find out you're looking, they'll know exactly what you're looking for." I sat with that for a second. Then I'll make sure they don't find out until it's too late to stop me. Michael called back 4 days later. "I want to help," he said, before I could even say hello. "I can't keep being the person who says nothing." He told me he had access to our grandfather's old financial files, boxes Dad had stored in Michael's garage years ago and forgotten about. He said he'd go through them, quietly. For the first time in weeks, I let myself feel something close to hope. Maybe this didn't have to end in a courtroom. Maybe Michael handing me the truth on his own was exactly the crack in this family's silence that could let honesty back in. 2 days later, his voice was different. "The boxes are gone," he said. "Dad had them moved out of my garage last week. Before any of this, he told Sarah it was spring cleaning." I felt the hope drain out of me so fast it left a ringing in my ears. "Naomi," Michael said, "I don't think Dad cleaned out those boxes because of spring." The email came in at 9:14 on a Wednesday, right between clients. Subject line, concerns. A complaint had been filed against my practice, not a client. The complaint didn't name one. It cited erratic behavior and personal instability, and asked the board to review whether I was fit to continue seeing patients. Nobody files a complaint like that out of nowhere. It takes a name. A letterhead. I called my father. "Did you do this?" "Do what?" His voice was so even, it made my hands go cold. "Someone reported me to my licensing board, Dad. Care to guess who might think that description fits me lately?" A pause. Long enough to answer the question by itself. "If people are worried about you," he said finally, "maybe you should ask yourself why." He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. That same week, my landlord mentioned my lease renewal might need a second look. My mother's oldest friend stopped returning my calls. My cousin Ellen sent one text, "Please stop dragging the family through this," and then nothing. It didn't feel like accidents stacking up. It felt like a machine switching on, built a long time ago, oiled and waiting. I went to see them one more time. I told myself it was strategy. Some small, stubborn part of me just wanted my parents back. My mother opened the door already braced, arms wrapped around herself. "Please," she said, "please just let this go. Look what it's doing to this family. I lost my license review date this week because of a complaint one of you filed," I said. "Michael's boxes disappeared the same week he offered to help me. Tell me that's coincidence and I'll walk away right now." My father stepped into the doorway behind her, arms crossed. For the first time in this entire ordeal, he didn't bother with a careful, wounded tone. "We did what we did to protect this family," he said. "And I will do it again if I have to. Not nothing happened. Not you're imagining things. I will do it again. Protect us from what, Dad?" "A truth you've never once let me hear. Some truths aren't worth what they cost. They're not yours to decide the cost of. Not anymore. Not for me. He closed the door. Gently. That was almost the worst part. How gentle it was. Like I was something being tidied away. I sat in the driveway a long time, wondering if some truths really weren't worth what they cost. Wondering if I should just let it go. I was still sitting there when my phone buzzed with a message from Vincent. One photo. No caption. The second I opened it, everything I understood about this family fell apart again. The photo was a probate file, finally released from archive, grainy, clearly shot off a page rather than pulled clean, but I could read every word that mattered. A trust. Established 38 years ago. Naming a beneficiary. Baby girl. Daughter of Robert Whitaker. Robert. My father's younger brother. The uncle I'd been told died in a car accident before I was born. A name mentioned twice a decade at family gatherings, always followed by a quick change of subject. Robert Whitaker wasn't my uncle. He was my father. I sat in that driveway and read it 3 times before 38 years rearranged itself into something that made terrible, complete sense. Robert had a daughter, me. And when he died, the trust money that should have come to me needed a guardian to manage it until I was old enough. My father didn't adopt me because he and my mother couldn't have children. Michael exists. Michael was already 3 when I was born. My father adopted me because it made him my legal guardian. And a guardian controls the money. That's why there was no blanket story, no baby pictures, no paperwork I was ever shown. Documentation invites questions. Questions invite audits. That's why the caseworker was silenced. Not to protect me from shame. To protect the arrangement from scrutiny. That's why Aunt Carol could never look at me for more than a few seconds. She'd known her brother's daughter was being raised 2 doors down, and she'd said nothing, because saying something meant unraveling everything her family had built on top of my inheritance. How much is in that trust now? I asked Vincent, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. I don't know the exact number, but if he's been drawing from it as his own for decades, that's not a family secret anymore. That's a crime. I stopped grieving my family that week. I started building a case instead. I called an estate attorney with no ties to my father, a woman named Grace Alvarez who specialized in exactly this: trust mismanagement, guardian abuse of estate funds, decades-old fraud that families like mine assume nobody will ever have the stomach to dig up. If what you're describing is accurate, she said, your father had a fiduciary duty to that money. If he used it for anything other than your benefit, that's not a gray area. That's breach of fiduciary duty. Possibly embezzlement, depending on the numbers. How do I prove it? Bank records, trust filings, anything showing withdrawals that don't match documented expenses in your name. I already knew underneath the numbness that those withdrawals wouldn't match. My childhood wasn't lavish. It was comfortable, respectable, responsible, my father's favorite word. Not the childhood of a girl whose trust fund required a law firm to hide. I requested records everywhere I had legal standing to. I asked Vincent to keep pushing, quietly, for account numbers, for filings. And I stopped calling my parents entirely. That silence rattled them more than any accusation could have. That silence rattled them more than any accusation could have. Michael texted, Dad's been weird all week. Made a bunch of calls to Blackwell and Voss. Asked me if you'd said anything about records. They weren't confused anymore about whether I suspected something. They were scared about how much I already knew. And scared men make mistakes. It took 3 weeks and a court petition before anything landed on Grace's desk. But land it did, on a Tuesday. Over 3 decades, roughly $900,000 moved out of that trust, she told me. Large, round numbers. Nothing tagged to tuition, medical costs, anything documented in your name. $900,000? What was it spent on? A remodel on your parents' house, 9 years ago. A boat, 4 years back, registered to your father. And a chunk that moved 18 months ago into an account tied to Blackwell and Voss directly, right around the time Vincent Mercer first appeared. My father hadn't just been quietly managing stolen money for decades. He'd pulled a fresh six-figure sum the moment a threat to his arrangement appeared on the horizon. I went to the house. He opened the door already looking like a man expecting bad weather. "I have your bank records, Dad. $900,000. A boat, a remodel, and a withdrawal that lines up perfectly with Vincent showing up in my life." "You have no idea what those funds were for," he said, and for the first time his voice cracked, right in the middle. "Then explain it. Show me one receipt with my name on it." Silence. "I'm giving these records to my attorney," I said, formally, this week. "You're really doing this to your own father? You did this to your own daughter for 38 years. He had absolutely nothing to say. My mother showed up 2 days later, no appointment, mascara already smudged before she got through the door. "Please, withdraw whatever you've given your attorney," she said. "Please, just take it back. I haven't filed anything with the court yet. Grace has records. That's all, for now." She sat down across from my own desk, in the chair where clients usually cry, and for one strange second I almost felt the pull of old habit, the instinct to comfort her instead of hold my ground. "I've been telling myself the same story for 38 years, she said, barely above a whisper. Then, steadier, he panicked. "After Robert died, he panicked. We'd just had Michael, another baby, another mouth, and suddenly there's this inheritance sitting there, and a scared young couple who, wait." My whole body went still. "You just called Robert my father." She went white. "I didn't, that's not what I've known the whole time. Not just that I was his daughter on paper. You've always known which parts were true." "Naomi, please, that's not fair. We raised you, we loved you. Then why lie about which parts were true?" She left without answering that, practically running to her car. I sat with my hands flat on my own desk, letting the shake work its way out of them, and thought about how much of my life had been spent watching this exact pattern. A woman who could cry on command and still never once say the thing that needed saying. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner table, because there was a dinner table, and it was worse and better than anything I could have planned, I want to ask you something. If you've ever been the one who kept everyone else's secrets while your own life was quietly built on someone else's lie, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. It matters more than you'd think, hearing that I'm not the only one. And if this is your first time at Com Drama Chronicles, subscribe now, because what my father said to me in front of his entire family is the reason I started telling these stories in the first place. Now, let's go to dinner. The invitation came from my mother, 3 days before Christmas, sweet as anything on the phone. "We're doing the whole family this year," she said. "Carol, Ruth, Michael, and Sarah, Ellen, and Mark. It would mean so much if you came." I knew her too well to think this was about missing me. I could hear two things underneath her cheerful voice. The first was theater. Nothing said this family has moved on. Nothing to see here like the difficult daughter back at the table for the holidays. The second was nerves. Word had reached her that an attorney had filed a formal petition. She wanted the whole family in one room to prove to herself as much as anyone that it hadn't touched anything that mattered. "You'll come, won't you?" she said. "Let's just have one nice night." I thought about the settlement letter sitting on Grace's desk, ready to go out the week after the holiday. I thought about the photographs still saved on my phone. I thought about 38 years of watching my father raise a glass and say the same 4 words like they were the punchline of a joke everyone was in on except me. "I'll be there," I said. "What can I bring? Just yourself." I brought myself and a folder. Because for once in my life, I wasn't going to let the truth wait in a car outside while everyone else got the version they wanted. The dining room smelled like cinnamon and roast and pine. The good china out. Candles lit. My mother had outdone herself. Carol sat near the window, already too quiet. Ruth fussed over the centerpiece. Ellen and Mark held hands under the table like people who hadn't heard anything yet. Michael and Sarah sat across from me. My father stood at the head of the table. We ate. We made the kind of conversation you make when everyone in the room is performing normal for someone else's benefit. Then my father tapped his glass with his fork. "Before dessert," he said, smiling around the table, "I just want to say how good it is to have everyone here. Especially, his eyes found me, and there it was, the pause he always built in, right on schedule. Our adopted one. A few soft laughs. Ellen glanced at Mark, unsure. Carol didn't laugh at all. She stared at her plate like it had asked her a question she didn't want to answer. I set my fork down. Say that again. The table went quiet in a different way than my father expected. Say it again, Dad. Our adopted one. You've called me that since I was 6? Let's tell everyone what it actually means. Naomi. My mother started. No. He gets to say it in front of everyone, so everyone gets to hear what it costs. I opened the folder. This is a trust, I said, laying the photograph on the table between the gravy and the candles. Established the year I was born. The beneficiary is a baby girl, daughter of Robert Whitaker. The room didn't move. Robert wasn't my uncle. He was my father. And when he died, this family needed a guardian to control what he left me. So you adopted me, Dad, not because you wanted a daughter, because you wanted the trust. Naomi, that's not, my father started, and his voice had already lost the flat certainty it always carried. $900,000, I said, laying the bank summary beside the photograph. A remodel, a boat, a payment to Blackwell and Voss 18 months ago, the same month a man named Vincent Mercer found me in a parking lot. None of it in my name. None of it documented. Ruth's hand went to her mouth. Ellen looked at Mark, then at the table, then at nothing. Michael reached over and took Sarah's hand. Carol, I said, and my aunt finally looked up. You knew, didn't you? Your brother's daughter raised 2 doors down and you never said a word. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her eyes were already wet. My father's hands were flat on the table, like he needed it to hold him up. Say it, Michael said quietly, the only person in that room besides me who already knew. For once in your life, Dad. Just say the true thing out loud in front of everyone who's about to hear it anyway. The silence that followed was longer than any silence I have ever sat through in a room full of people who love each other. Yes, my father said, barely above a whisper. I used the trust. I told myself it was owed to us. My mother's face crumpled entirely, and this time he didn't tell her to be quiet. This time he didn't say anything at all. I'm not doing this to destroy the family, I said, standing. I'm doing this because I finally know who I am. My attorney will be in touch, formally, this week. Nobody said a word as I gathered the folder and walked out, past a dessert nobody was going to eat. Nobody called me that night. I hadn't expected them to. I drove home from my parents' house with the folder on the passenger seat and the radio off, and I sat in my own driveway for a long time before I went inside, the way you sit somewhere after a car accident, just to feel the ground stay still under you. My phone started buzzing around 10, not from my parents, from everyone around them. Ellen first. I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know any of that. Then, 20 minutes later, a second text, softer. Are you okay? I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure yet what the honest answer was. Ruth called twice and left no voicemail either time, which told me more than a message would have. Harold, who'd spent an entire phone call finding reasons to hang up on me 2 months earlier, sent one line. I always wondered about you and Robert's eyes. I should have said something a long time ago. I read that 3 times. It wasn't an apology. It was closer to a confession of his own. A small one, riding in on the wreckage of a bigger one. Aunt Carol didn't text at all. She showed up. She knocked on my office door the next afternoon, between clients, still in her church clothes, hands twisting the strap of her purse like she didn't know what to do with them without gardening gloves on. I'm not here to ask you to go easy on him, she said, before I could even offer her a chair. I don't expect that from you. I don't think I've earned the right to expect anything from you. Then why are you here? Because I let you grow up 2 doors down from people who knew exactly whose daughter you were, and I never once told you the truth, and I've spent 38 years telling myself that silence wasn't the same thing as lying. She sat down, finally, in the chair where my clients usually cry. It was the same thing. I know that now. I think I always knew it and just didn't want to carry what knowing it would cost me. I didn't tell her it was fine. It wasn't fine, and I've spent too many years teaching people not to say that sentence to mean anything less when it was my own life. But I told her I heard her. And for the first time in 30 years, she looked at me for longer than a few seconds at a time. Word moves fast in a family that spent decades protecting its own image, and it moves faster once the image is already broken. By the following week, my mother had called exactly once. Not to apologize, not yet, just to ask, in a voice scraped thin, whether I was going to talk to anyone else about it. Reporters, she meant. Neighbors. People at her church. I told her I hadn't planned to, and that whether other people found out had never really been the point for me. It turned out other people found out had never really been the point for me. It turned out other people found out anyway. Small towns and small social circles don't need help. Grace's office had filed the petition properly through the courts, and court filings are public whether a family wants them to be or not. Someone at the courthouse mentioned it to someone at the club, and by January it wasn't really a secret in that part of Portland at all. It just hadn't been said to my face yet, the way most things in that family never were. Michael told me his father-in-law asked him about it at a barbecue, careful and roundabout, the way people ask about things they already half know. Michael didn't deny any of it. That was new for him. For 18 years he'd been the person who softened things, who found a gentler word for what his father had done. He didn't reach for one this time. I told him the truth, Michael said, when he called to tell me about it. All of it. It felt strange saying it out loud to someone who wasn't already inside the family. But it also felt like the first honest conversation I've had about any of this that didn't cost me something to have. I understood that better than I expected to. Telling the truth to a stranger is easier, sometimes, than telling it to the people who taught you to keep it. Grace filed the civil claim 11 days later. Breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of trust assets, clinical language for a betrayal that doesn't sound nearly big enough on paper. My father didn't fight it. He knows he'd lose, Grace told me. Badly, publicly. He's choosing to settle. Restitution plus interest. Paid out over time. Not everything he took, but real money and real accountability. I sat with that longer than I expected to. But real money and real accountability. Not triumphant. Just quiet. Like a held breath finally let out after 38 years. It took most of that spring to work through the paperwork, longer than I expected, the way anything involving a family and money always seems to stretch past whatever timeline the lawyers first give you. My father sold the boat within a month, without being asked to, which Grace said was smart of him. A judge looks more favorably on someone already unwinding the excess than someone waiting to be forced. I didn't feel anything when I heard about the boat. I thought I might. I didn't. The house sold too, eventually, the one with the remodel that had never been documented as anything but a gift to itself. My parents moved into something smaller on the other side of town, a rental, the kind of place they would have once considered beneath them. I never saw it. I don't know if I ever will. My mother sent one letter after the settlement was finalized, handwritten, which felt strange coming from a woman who'd spent decades curating a version of our family that photographed well. She said she'd told herself for so long that love and control were the same thing that she'd forgotten there was a difference. She didn't ask me to forgive her. I noticed that. My father hasn't reached out at all. Aunt Carol sent a card in the spring. No apology in it either, just a pressed flower from her garden, and 4 words. I should have said something. I keep it on my desk, not because it fixes anything, but because it's the closest thing to honest that side of the family has ever given me. I met Vincent one last time at a coffee shop near my office, bright and ordinary, the kind of place you'd take a friend, not a stranger with a folder. You didn't have to keep going after that first meeting, I told him. Why didn't you just hand me the file and walk away? Because knowing the truth about someone and staying silent is its own kind of harm, he said. I wasn't going to be one more person who let you keep believing a lie. Michael and I have dinner most Sundays now. Sarah usually joins, and she always brings something she's baked, like she's still deciding whether she's allowed to be part of this new, smaller version of the family. And I always tell her she is, because she stayed too, in her own quiet way, when staying wasn't easy. We don't talk about Dad much. We don't need to. What we have isn't built on protecting a version of events anymore. It's just built on showing up. Michael asked me once, over dinner, whether I thought he could have told me sooner, whether there was a version of this where he came to me at 22 instead of 38, and it would have hurt less. I told him the truth, because that's the only thing either of us has left to offer each other now. I don't know if it would have hurt less. I know it would have hurt differently, and it would have been his to carry with me instead of mine to carry alone. That's not nothing. Some days it feels like almost everything. I still see my old office plant on my receptionist's desk, the one she waters every Tuesday. And some mornings I think about how much of my life I spent tending things quietly, out of habit, without asking whether they were actually alive or just still standing because nobody had said otherwise. I introduced myself at a conference last month. Just my name, nothing else attached to it. Naomi Whitaker, I said, and shook the stranger's hand, and felt the whole sentence land clean and whole and entirely mine. No joke. No pause before a punchline. For 38 years, I asked everyone around me who I was supposed to be. I finally stopped asking. If you've ever sat at a table and realized the joke was never really a joke, comment, "Our adopted one," so I know you made it to the end with me. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Calm Drama Chronicles, because there's always another family, another table, and another truth waiting to be set down. Take care of yourself.